Hi everyone, my name's Mary Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be talking about the autoimmune disease eczema. So to start out, I'm going to give some broad facts. Eczema affects about 18 million Americans each year, and about 10 million of those are children. 50% of the children with eczema go on to develop asthma, and the reason for this is still being researched, but right now research is pointing to the fact that the two genes may be coupled together at crossing over events. About 2/3 of the population say the disease interferes with their life in some way, whether that's exercising or doing the dishes, and then actually 30% of people say that it affects their sleep. The disease itself is rarely fatal, but it creates a greater likelihood of secondary infections, and these secondary infections can be much more dangerous than eczema itself. The most common secondary infections with this disease are staph, strep, and herpes. Okay, so some characteristics of the disease. It wasn't confirmed to be an autoimmune disease until early 2021. It was often suspected to be, but enough about the mechanism wasn't known. It's a cell-mediated hypersensitivity response, and it's triggered by a mutation in our filaggrin proteins, or that's what it's suspected to be triggered by. There are characteristic rashes that appear on areas of our body where the skin actually makes physical contact with an irritant. So it's very common to be on someone's hands, but it's also common to be on our flexural surfaces, which are just these surfaces on our body that can kind of bend. So the sides of our neck, the insides of our elbows, the backs of our knees, eczema tends to be present there as well. Like I kind of said earlier, the mechanism is largely unknown for the disease, but it's suspected to be a mutation in the filaggrin protein. And this filaggrin protein is in the surface of our skin, and it's essential in maintaining the skin moisture barrier. But a mutation in this causes the skin to dry out, and it's no longer able to hold moisture like it should be. So prior to doing this presentation, I knew that eczema and psoriasis were similar, but I didn't actually know how they were different, and so I thought I'd spend a minute and highlight the differences between these two diseases. So they're both autoimmune diseases of the skin, but psoriasis causes your skin cells to grow too quickly, whereas eczema, like I said, is caused by suspected to be caused by these mutations, which disrupt the skin barrier and create super dry skin. Psoriasis tends to be less itchy and uncomfortable, and it doesn't present itself on the flexural surfaces of the knees or elbows like eczema does. And sunlight actually makes psoriasis better, but it makes eczema much worse, which makes sense because when we go into the sun, we might get a little bit sunburned, and then our skin tends to become a bit more dry and dried out, and that only amplifies the effects of eczema. So statistically, about 15 to 20% of children will develop eczema, and globally, about 1 to 3% of adults. Actually, in the United States, it's reported that about 7.3% of adults have eczema, but from my research, there's nothing that makes Americans more susceptible. I think this elevated number is just from better reporting and better access to healthcare. Eczema does tend to have an effect on a person's mental health. Like I said earlier, 2/3 of the population say that it affects their daily life, and 30% of those people say it affects their sleep, which is something that's vital to mental health. But it tends to mostly affect teenagers with the disease, and the rate or the statistic for suicidal thoughts of a teenager without eczema is about 9%, whereas someone who has eczema experiences the rate of experiencing suicidal thoughts is about 15 to 16%. So it's a really sad statistic, and it's caused most likely by the fact that teenagers are more embarrassed by eczema, and so they begin to withdraw from social events, from hanging out with their friends, and they begin to isolate themselves, which it's detrimental to their mental health. So a few symptoms of the disease, like I said earlier, someone with eczema is much more likely to develop asthma, or someone with asthma is also much more likely to develop eczema. So here in the top left, you can see this rash on the flexural surface on the inside of the elbows. Around the exterior of the rash, you can see this kind of buildup of ashy skin, which shows how dry this person's skin must be. A common symptom of eczema that everyone experiences is extremely dry skin, which begins to be very itchy. And as people itch their dry skin, they break the surface of the skin, and these sores begin to form. Here you can see this person must have touched something that irritated their skin because they have this kind of characteristic rash on the back of their hand. And then right here, in some people, these rashes develop pustules and can actually ooze and are extremely painful and uncomfortable. Here again, you can see how dry this woman's skin is on this sore on her elbow. And then in extreme cases of eczema, if left untreated for an extended period of time, your skin can actually turn into a lichen. And so you can see here how this person's skin is completely hardened, and it often leads to discoloration of the skin. But this doesn't occur in everyone, only in extreme cases due to complete loss of moisture in the skin. So to diagnose the disease, the doctor first takes a family history of the patient because the disease is thought to be genetic, and then also physically examines the person. They must experience itchy skin, and then 3 of the following symptoms, those being a history of asthma, a history of flexural involvement, a history of dry skin, skin rashes prior to the age of 2, and visible flexural dermatitis. And by visible flexural dermatitis, dermatitis is just another word for those patches, those red patches that I showed earlier. So those red patches on these flexural surfaces serve as a way to diagnose the disease, specifically if they are on the inner elbow in the back of the knee, and because then doctors can rule out psoriasis, like I said earlier. So there are a few methods of treatment. Because the mechanism isn't completely understood, we still have not found a cure, but there are some ways to improve the quality of life of someone suffering from eczema. And those actually begin with just things you can do at home. The first coming from your shower routine. So in the shower, you should take a much cooler shower because hot water tends to dry out the skin more. So a cool shower, and then use soaps that have a low pH and no fragrances, as they're much less irritating. And then after the shower, you should lather your skin with these thick lotions. Some specific brands that are recommended are Eucerin and CeraVe. And then continue to put this lotion on your skin throughout the day anytime you feel it beginning to really become dry again. And just doing that really improves the symptoms. And then as far as going to the doctor, what they often give to patients are topical corticosteroids, which patients want to be careful with because if you use them for long enough of a period of time, they can actually lead to atrophy of the skin. And so doctors warn patients to only use them once a day, and they've been proven to be just as effective used once a day as twice a day, and to really watch for how long they're using them. You can also use immunomodulators, and then phototherapy is being developed. In this phototherapy, sends UV light on the surface of your skin, and it causes the white blood cells that are there to leave, and then this reduces the inflammation in your skin. And then antibiotics are helpful, but only to treat secondary infections. Like I said earlier, you're at a much higher risk of developing these secondary infections with the disease. And so antibiotics can help those, but they don't actually help eczema. Okay, here are some of the sources that I used, or actually all the sources that I used. So I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.